Oregon's next opponent is Oklahoma State.
Mm.
If you don't count Oregon State, it would be their biggest non-conference game of the season.
Yeah.
And that's not saying much because the Cowboys, they were rather unimpressive in their opening season win over UT Martin, the Skyhawks of UT Martin, 27-7 that final.
Well, look.
They lost their starting quarterback.
Yeah, starting quarterback, and then their best defensive player is been arrested for, like, larceny. So that's... Look, all you need to know about the game, one, it's a 28-point spread at this point. That tells you what Vegas thinks. And when the other team's coach is making excuses for what's about to happen, that's usually not a good indicator that they feel very confident. Gundy is basically saying that Oregon shouldn't schedule Oklahoma State because Oregon spends more money than Oklahoma State. That's not what you want to hear if you're a player for a vote of confidence getting ready to go into that game. And I think he kind of pissed off Lanning in Oregon. They may not say it publicly. Dude, Lanning's going to lay an ass kicking on Gundy. He just did.
Laying the 4 touchdowns?
Yes.
Here's the audio. This is what Gundy said.
The same thing as you. They're a good football team. You know, Oregon is playing really well. You know, I think they're well coached. They're spending a lot of money, and you know they've put a lot into that organization. And you can see they're a good football team.
So that's the only clip I heard. Did he say something other than that?
Yeah. So that was during the I think his post game or press conference, and then he went on. You know, they did a little coaches show, and he said that they spent $40 million on their roster and we spent $7 million, and that they should play teams in the non-con that are more commiserate with their spending. And it's
so I didn't hear that part.
Yeah.
Because when I was saying, like, I heard that clip, I'm like,
that didn't seem very inflammatory.
What's the problem with that? Of course they spend more money. There's nothing wrong with that. But now he's saying that they shouldn't play Oklahoma State because they spend more.
Yeah. And then again, he's throwing out a figure saying, well, we spent 7, they spent 40. And I think that's what kind of bothered Lanning, and Lanning responded.
They didn't spend 40.
Well, and that's the point is these numbers keep going up, and everyone just throws out these figures because
you think they spent $40 million on this team?
No, I don't think they spent $40 million. I think they spent a lot.
But I do think the gap. He's not wrong about the gap.
But do we have Lanning's response?
Yeah, I got it right here. I was just clarifying that.
Yes.
$40 million.
It's a bit much.
All right, so here's what Lanning said.
Yeah, it sounds like there is. Listening to him talk. Like I said, I got a ton of respect for Coach Gundy. You know, ultimately, how blessed are we to be in a place that's invested in winning? If you want to be a top 10 team in college football, you better be invested in winning. And we spend to win. Some people save to have an excuse for why they don't, right? And ultimately, like, he's a great coach. They've done an unbelievable job, but I want to be a team that's competing at the highest level. And we're really fortunate to be in that situation. So I can't speak on their situation. I have no idea, you know, what they got in their pockets over there. I'm sure UT Martin maybe didn't have as much as them last week, and they played. So we'll let it play out.
Amen.
No, that's very true.
I mean,
that's a good answer.
A couple things. I love that Lanning isn't embarrassed about having money to spend.
Yeah.
In what world are we living in now? I love how, you know, whether you think it's Oregon or SC or, you know, SMU, BYU all of a sudden can spend money and they're kind of on the come up. So we were all fine back in the day when the SEC teams were paying kids under the table, and we were fine with that they had the best teams that money could buy. But now that someone outside of that realm can now spend as much money as these teams, now it's upsetting that the gap is what it is. And I would also like to point out to Mike Gundy that Oklahoma State has a history, Barry Sanders, Hartley Dykes, T. Boone Pickens, of paying kids under the table, and also had, outside of Phil Knight, the most expensive booster in the country in T. Boone Pickens, who talked about spending his way. And it's one of the reasons why Oklahoma State has had a glow up under Mike Gundy is he had the backing of $1 billion booster. But now that booster is dead, and you don't have the funds that Oregon has, and now you're trying to take shots saying that, Oregon can only now play, 10 other schools that can spend with them? And I thought Dan Lanning was great when he was like, well, you played UT Martin, and you didn't seem to have a problem with that.
Well, why don't they cancel the game then?
Yeah.
Don't teams cancel non-conference games all the time.
It's just if
you don't like it, cancel it.
Indiana just did it with Virginia Tech this year.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State played Oregon State. Was there an element of, well, Oregon State doesn't have any money, therefore we don't need to go in there and whoop that ass? Like, these coaches, and by the way, they're not the only one. I'd have to look it up. I want to say it was like the Georgia Southern coach.
That's Clay Helton.
No, then it wasn't him. I got to look it up.
I'm 40.
I'll find it. But there was a clip that was making the rounds of a coach who, again, lost this weekend. And someone asked him what happened in the second half. And he talked about how much money the other squad had spent on their lines. And he said, well, in the fourth quarter, you should get a return on their investment. This is becoming the de facto get out of jail. I got my ass kicked card. Therefore, I'm just going to blame it and say, well, I don't have the money to play with these kids over here.
Yeah, it's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. One, it's a cowardly cop-out. And two, to act like the college football world has been this equality thing and only recently has become the haves and the have-nots. Dude, grow up. In what world are you living in? If you think back in the 80s and the 90s that Miami had a roster made up of choir boys that were going to Miami just to go play for the U, and they weren't getting paid, and that's how they assembled the greatest college football team of all time, but everyone else was playing on the same field, at least now it's above board. At least now, if you want to spend money, you can spend money.
And I like that Lanning admits that.
Yes.
He's just like, yeah, dude, yes, we're in this to win it.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes. Gundy's it's just sour grapes.
Sour grapes.
And he's always like that, though, isn't he? Isn't he always
Yeah,
bitching?
He's just bitching about something.
So I was looking up, T-Boone died in 2019.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if his death coincided with a little bit of a decline at Oklahoma State.
Their fall.
It didn't really.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you look at Gundy, by the way, has been there forever.
And he's done a really nice job.
He's a good coach. He'd been there since 2005. They rattled off a Fiesta Bowl win, 12 wins in 2011. They won 10 games in a row, 15, 16, 17. And then Pickens died in 19. Okay. They were 8-5. COVID year, they went 8-3. Then they went 12-2 and won the Fiesta Bowl again in 2001. Now, since then, they've been a little up and down, but he won 10 games 2 years ago. It was really only last year that they were crap. They were 3-9 last year. So I just wondered if perhaps maybe the death of T-Boone Pickens, he's just pissed that T-Boone passed and they just haven't been the same since. Yeah. That's really not the case with Oklahoma State.
Yeah. Yeah. So
they've actually been able to keep up, even though I don't keep up. They're not keeping up with Oregon, but like you said, they were never keeping up with the SEC schools anyway.
It was the Georgia Southern played Mississippi State, and they lost 34-17.
I think you're talking about Georgia State. Georgia Southern is Clay
I'm sorry, not Georgia Southern. I literally just have it in front of me. It was Southern Miss. His name is Charles Huff. And they lost 34-17 to the Cowbells, the Fighting Cowbells. And in the third quarter, Mississippi State pulled away, and they scored 21 unanswered points and kind of put the game out of reach. And in his post-game press conference, and I quote, "They spent $15 million on their O&D line. In the second half, they should get a return on their investment. We're built pretty good, but we're not built for that league." Then don't play. Right? Then if you're Mike Gundy, put your tail between your legs and go away. But it really is annoying to me that this is becoming an acceptable de facto answer of, well, we don't have the money, so we can't play. Dickert did some of this at Washington State that kind of drove me crazy. Stop making excuses. This is the world that we live in, and it's relatively the same world that we've always lived in. Because the idea that that Southern Miss years ago could have played with Mississippi State. Okay. That's not the reality. We're trying to make college football out to be this evil thing now. And I would make the argument that there's more parity and you have a chance to be better in this version of it than we ever had in the last 30 plus years.
Yeah, I agree.